Do you think podcasters listen to a lot of podcasts?
That's a good question. It's like, do chefs try a lot of restaurants? Yeah, I feel like they have to in order to get like a sense of what is good or bad.
That's fair.
Like do actors watch a lot of movies?
But I feel like I know a fair amount of people who are like TikTokers. Well, I don't know TikTokers, but I feel like there were people who started on TikTok and weren't like avid TikTok watchers before.
That's true. I feel like the barrier has gotten so much lower now. You don't need to know like the tricks of the trade because it's just
Yeah. Well, welcome.
Thank you. I'm a huge fan of the show. So it's really an honor to be on here.
Right. We were just talking. This is Ameesh's second podcast.
That's right. I was on a podcast in undergrad. But that's probably not even available anymore unless Rice University somehow is like still hailing it. But
you don't think they're promoting it still, or
I hope not. That would be really strange because it was about very inane things, and if they don't have anything better to do, then I'm very scared for my alma mater. So
what was the podcast?
It was a podcast. So I was in student government in undergrad, and they were just discussing some of the topics at hand, and they used one or two snippets from me, and then that was about it. So it was so uninteresting. I think it felt like I was on as a formality, if nothing else. So I'm much more excited to be here. Mm-hmm. I feel like I'll get to speak my truth a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Get to I'm around much better hosts, and so it's an honor. Truly,
Thank you.
It's an honor.
Do you want to intro Ameesh?
Do we intro? I mean, this is Ameesh. You work in Sergey's?
No, I work with Sanjeet. I do formal methods in machine learning.
Wow, I suck. Okay, do you hang out with Sergey's students?
I do. I work on RL, so we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, because I was about to say you work on RL, and then I'm like, oh, maybe
I
not.
do. Yeah.
Okay,
that's good. Yeah.
You're a fourth year PhD
I'm a fourth year PhD student, so it's getting closer to the end. Mm-hmm. I've been working on stuff in formal methods and machine learning for a while now. I came from Rice in Houston, Texas, so H-Town. And before that, I was in Cleveland, Ohio as a wee lad. So been around, seen many people, as Connor and Lisa both also have. And so, yeah.
Well, you're quite social.
I do like to meet people.
Mm-hmm.
It's been nice. I feel like the Berkeley community, I think PhD students in general, and especially in EECS, have a lot of really great qualities. I think they're very community oriented. I think that's harder to get when you're in the industry and people have their own kind of individual agendas a bit more.
Even other schools, like I think CMU is no shade to CMU, but like just the schools where their office setup is like 2 to 3 grad students to an office tends to be less community driven.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't know. Go Tartans. I don't know anything about CMU. But it's nice. It is very community driven. People here, I think, have they care about what they do, but they don't make it. They don't impose, I think, as much as people may expect. So it's been a nice. Yeah, I feel it's very cozy actually. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's like a Berkeley product placement podcast.
Yeah, come to Berkeley. Yeah.
So. I don't know if I should intro you more or if we should just jump in.
Give more, yeah.
All right. Some facts I know about you is that you live like you are 60 sometimes.
I do.
I guess we all wake up relatively early, but you, I feel like, are pretty regimented, or at least seem to be.
Yeah, I like routine. I like rituals. I feel like that's a big theme. So I guess what Elisa was alluding to is that my bedtime on school nights is...
Is it 10?
10:30.
Okay. Yeah.
I try to be winding...
Like 11.
Yeah, right. So I try to be winding down by 10:30. I have, my nighttime routine, a little moisturizing, do a little journaling.
You have a skincare routine?
I have a very light skincare routine. I do masks once a week, and then I moisturize and wash my face.
Yeah.
It's the bare minimum. I don't think I would. I wouldn't go out around an amateur and be like, oh my gosh, I have such a great skincare routine. But yeah, and I wake up early. I like to have a morning routine, and then it's been nice. I think in the see a flexibility that is a PhD, I think giving yourself a little bit of rhythm can be useful.
Yeah.
Of course, that doesn't go for everybody, but I think having that has been able to, helps you stabilize you a bit. I think even when things can be, just things, there can be really busy times as a grad student, and there can be times where you're not quite as busy. And so getting a little bit of rhythm has been very helpful for me. So it's something I like a lot.
What do you journal about?
Yeah, it's been something that I think that grows and changes over the course of time. I used to journal when I was a first and second year. It was just like my feelings and, what's going on with my friends and family and relationships and stuff like that. And since then, I think over the years, it's become, there's still that element, but I still am now, I'm a little bit more regimented about like, oh, what did I do today in lab and what am I planning on doing, and having a bit more coherence and vision, talking a bit more, like trying to journal a bit. It's a way of kind of self-regularizing, I think. Yeah. Again, it's very easy to just kind of like pursue whims in grad school. And so I have the chance to like stabilize that a bit. So, okay, what are the things I'm working on going towards? Is there a vision of research or an agenda or some community I'm trying to reach, and move in that direction? I think that helps a lot. So, yeah.
I also find routine very helpful. Like you said, grad school is very open-ended for a very long period of time. And for me, like having a routine of like when I'm working and when I'm not, I find really helpful. Like partially in that, like, I don't know, my brain knows that it's like, oh, this is work time, like you're going to work now, but also like for not kind of feeling guilty about the times that I'm not working, which is something I struggled a lot with when I was younger, like always feeling like, oh, I should be doing more right now. Yeah. But now I like, I've done my hours that I was supposed to do today, and like now I can, be easy on myself for the other hours.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something I need to work on. I used to be very good at this. I used to be very, very routine oriented. I would say more than you should. Like I would like get really anxious if I like didn't wake up at the right time, or if I like didn't come to work exactly at 9:15, or like before 9:15. But now I've swung too much in the other direction, where I think I've like tried to be more flexible. And then part of it's just like, I don't know, you let some things slip in grad school if you're like, yeah, I'll take a meeting at 8 p.m. And then suddenly it's like, oh, everything's kind of more flux. Yeah. So I need to get back into a more regimented, like, especially with sleeping, like trying to keep a more consistent, like I wake up at this time and I go to bed at this time every day.
Yeah. I've had the same experience. I think at the beginning of grad school, I was coming in from like pre-grad school stuff, undergrad and masters and stuff. And then, I had this like very set rhythm. And then, I mean, obviously I think COVID had a lot to do with adjusting that. But yeah, now more recently, I'm realizing that there's to ritual and routine, there's a beauty to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely think there are people who will just like it more than others and get more out of it than others. But yeah, I think there's kind of no end to what you can do if you want to provide that structure. I think it can be helpful. But yeah, I definitely experienced that. It's cyclical, right? I mean, there's going to be times where you're going to make compromises in grad school too.
Sure.
Like you're going to have, like I had an 8 a.m. meeting today, and usually I'm doing something else at 8 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you're going to have to make compromises. I think it's one thing I've learned. And so if you can figure out how to like keep your routine or keep your rhythm, or like maintain your rituals, like the things that make you feel consistent throughout that in whatever way possible, I think that it makes a difference. It makes you feel grounded. I think that that's a huge thing. I went most of grad school not feeling grounded at all, and so getting back into that has been great.
How long have you said, like, when would you say you started feeling grounded, and why?
Yeah, I think more recently. I think you come into grad school. And this conversation I have, I think it's been heartening to hear that it's more of a shared experience than I thought it was. But I think you start your PhD with certain expectations on it's going to go exactly this way. I know exactly which projects I'm going to work on and who I'm going to be working with. And I think for me, and I think for some, at least a few others, starts to not be the case rather quickly, right? And you have to sort of learn how to adjust on the fly. And I think then it really comes down to you having sort of a concrete, whether it's a routine or a vision of what you're trying to go for, or things that you just want to accomplish, that'll keep you grounded. And for me, I didn't have that necessarily. I came in wanting to try something new in grad school and move. I didn't do very much formal methods before this, and came into a new space, bunch of new people, a new environment. And I was sort of like the kid in the candy store. I was very excited about, like, oh my gosh, there's a million things I could work on.
Yeah.
Sampling things, but not really trying as much in earnest as I think would have helped to keep me grounded.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I started to float a little bit and just try, like, oh, I'm going to just try a bunch of random things on random days or weeks. And I think the further along you get into grad school, the more you realize, like, okay, it's for better or for worse, right? It's time to, like, let's see what we can do in terms of consistent projects and topics that matter. And I think that'll help, that helped keep me grounded. So that, and then the combination of bringing my habits back, my routines back and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That helps. I think that's created a much more consistent flow of things. And so, it happens. I think that if there are people who feel a little floaty, I feel like it shouldn't be something that you like panic about, because it happens.
Right.
But at the same time, right, there are ways of mitigating that, and it just comes down to when you're ready to try things and when you want to keep exploring and drawing those lines for yourself.
Yeah.
Very relatable.
Yeah.
Like explore, exploit problem is always hard. And
right.
I think grad school is often like presented as this time to explore a lot. And so you like kind of give yourself a lot of room to explore. And then,
I mean, it depends on the mindset. I feel like I knew quite a lot of people, especially in AI, just because I think because of the supply and demand of AI, the people tend to come into grad school with a lot more research experience. So I often felt like there were a lot of people who had just gotten into grad school who were already in the exploit phase.
Right.
And so I felt like kind of guilty of like, oh, I shouldn't be in the explore phase because that's like, I should have done that in undergrad, which is ridiculous.
It is.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. I feel like it's true. I think in CS especially, where there's not as much, it doesn't seem to be as much of a hard requirement to have apprenticeship as it may be in wet labs where you're working under medicine for a really long time and specific experiments and things, and you don't have as much kind of authoritative control over a project. That's something you can get pretty quickly in CS, right? It's just, we're not working with finite physical resources, right? I mean, a lot of it is just software, and that makes it pretty easy. I've seen people come in, they know exactly what they want, they actuate on that, and then get out of here. And then, then there's people who didn't. I mean, I spent a solid year just like trying different things.
Mm-hmm.
And, I also felt, I was like, I don't know if I'm doing grad school right, because I see people sprinting really hard. But yeah, I think it's still a process. I haven't like fully convinced myself that there's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
But it's something that I keep telling myself. There's a mantra to just kind of following the path and vision that you believe in the most at that moment.
Yeah. So what are formal methods?
Formal methods. Wow. I knew I would get on a podcast to talk about formal methods at some point in my life. Of course. It was going to happen.
It's a hot market, I'm sure.
It's the hottest market. It's interesting how unhot of it. Well, we can talk about it. Formal methods basically means I have some property, some formalized notion of something I want from a system, generally software, but also hardware. And
what would be an example?
Sure. So for example, I have a car, right, or some vehicle, and I want to ensure that the controllers that maybe help with like your automatic steering or something like that won't, given like input to a steering, won't like adjust it more than a certain degree.
Okay.
So it'll only keep it within a certain range, for example. And formal methods is the practice of formalizing that into things like formal logics, so specifications, and then being able to check formally, so this is called formal verification, whether or not your system meets a property. And then synthesis, which is maybe I have a property, but I don't yet have the actual system that meets it. Can I automatically synthesize a property that meets the specification through techniques of, building things automatically, whether that's through AI or just through kind of more straight up methods. And so I work on that. Specifically with the intersection of machine learning. So I have learned systems, which are typically pretty black box, and I want those things to abide by specific properties. And how can I do that the best I can? How can I assure learned black boxes will behave in ways I want them to as much as I can? It's interesting being kind of in between the two fields, one of which, I don't work as much on LLMs or even generative modeling, which are super hot, but working in a space that is very kind of hype driven, for lack of a better term, very driven by what's being used the most and perhaps what's making the most money. And then informal methods, which is a super academic, very kind of siloable field that doesn't have a ton of application quite yet, and it's more being explored for its relative promise. And the interaction of those two, I think, is, it can be jarring, but it's been an interesting experience living in this intersection and kind of being pulled in either direction. But to answer that, formal methods is, modeling, verifying, and synthesizing things that you want to trust.
And it seems like it's getting like a little bit of its day in the sun with Amazon investing a lot in formal methods for distributed systems. I work in distributed systems, and it comes up more and more there, even though I think a lot of these formal logic based fields are they feel very academic and pretty far away from especially consumer facing applications, whereas LLMs and generative AI is really tangible, your grandma can use ChatGPT and
right.
Your grandma's not trying to formally verify.
Not using an SMT solver.
Protocol.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it is interesting. I mean, there's definitely industry applications. So I mean, you have, of course, SAT and SMT. You have things like Garobi that are on scheduling or working on problems that require you to cast them as SAT, things like that. And then you have companies like Amazon, or you have chip design companies, things like that care a lot about really getting formal guarantees on the practice or the software that enables the practice. Yeah, I think that there's of course I work in the field, so I'll be happy to shill it despite my skepticisms. And I think there's, fingers crossed there's more to come. I'll knock on wood on that.
It seems like, at least for systems that involve machine learning, formal methods would be incredibly important. I don't work directly in AI safety, but in the AI safety somehow comes up a lot in my work of robustness and interpretability.
Definitely.
And a lot of it is you need some formal guarantees that certain behaviors won't happen.
Yeah.
I don't know if is that not formal methods?
No, it certainly is.
Okay.
And I think that's why this intersection is now burgeoning.
Yeah.
I guess on the point of you're right that it seems important, but we don't see it, right?
Yeah.
Formal methods papers are not 30% of what you see at a learning venue, or even close to that, of course.
Right.
I think the challenge is right now is that, one, it is pretty hard to specify a lot of the things that you care about.
Yeah.
In these models. For example, something that I would care about in terms of safety is I don't want LLMs to spread harmful disinformation, right? But that's a really hard property to formalize. What is, how do I quantify that? How do I make that an objective that a learning-based system can even interface with? And the other thing is that even if we are able to have these properties, for example, in the field of vision, there are properties you can formalize saying, I don't want, if I have an image that has a ground truth label in terms of classification, if I perturb it a certain amount, the label shouldn't change, or it shouldn't change drastically, or your logic shouldn't change drastically. So this is something you can quantify.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be the best, most powerful property, but it's something. But even those properties are really hard to verify, because verification means I am assuring you in all cases, or almost all cases, that that's going to be the case. And, if you use a huge neural network that has millions, billions, and so on parameters that you need to actually formally check, these methods won't scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so formal methods, I think, has yet to prove itself in this space for those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is where a lot of the research is kind of going towards is, can we either scale these things, or if we can't scale them, what are solutions that we can use formal methods on, or how can we relax them?
Mm-hmm.
Questions like that. And so, yeah, I mean, those are, I think, the questions that I am excited about, and hopefully they bring a little bit more kind of usefulness.
Are you, either of you, familiar with AI alignment?
Of course.
Okay, right. So this is another sphere that I often find myself in.
Yeah.
Aligning machine learning systems to human values.
Yeah.
I am infuriated often by this field because they never specify whether the goal is, given a formal set of values, how do you align, which I think is a more reasonable question. But it seems like a lot of alignment is like, what are human values? Which I don't know if that's a CS problem. But would you see formal methods as like the peak form of AI alignment?
That's such a funny question. I work with Stuart and some of his students, and so we've worked on papers together, and now the work we do isn't specifically towards alignment.
Yeah.
But everybody I work with sort of subscribes to the alignment principles, and that this is a problem that we need to solve.
Can you describe Stuart Russell in just a quick blurb?
Stuart is great. I mostly just work with his students, so our names will appear together, but we don't have any formal relationship or anything. But his I think his philosophy, and of course if he ever hears this, he could totally come in and correct me, but is that there is a possibility in the future that learned systems, whenever you learn, right, you set an objective that you want to optimize. And the fear is that the objectives that we're now setting for these models are not actually objectives that would align with the way that humans would want these systems to behave. At least as describing as alignment. And Stuart really buys into that, and buys into the notion that this is a problem that we need to fix. Because if we don't, the way that learned systems are advancing, they're going to essentially only serve the interests of these objective functions, which I guess you could call self-interest, right? And if that interest isn't aligned with what we care about as humans or groups of humans, then it could lead to disaster. Stuart really is into that.
Is he the one who does the paperclip?
Yeah. So that was that's Dylan, who a former student of his and Anka's, who is also kind of a preeminent person in alignment. He's appeared on multiple podcasts, so he's a vet. But yeah, the idea of the paperclip example Lisa's alluding to is that you have you show a robot, you as a human being can either make staples or paperclips, and it might be much easier for me to make paperclips, but I might value staples more, so I make a couple paperclips, and then the robot seeing me make them is like, okay, this human only cares about paperclips because the robot doesn't know what I care about or my capabilities. And so the robot just makes a billion paperclips. And now I'm like, oh, wow, I wanted staples. Like, what's happening? It's a cutesy example, and I think I'm not exactly verbatim referencing the original paper, but if you're interested, it's cooperative inverse reinforcement learning, I believe is the name. It's a good paper. It's cool. Yeah. But that's the kind of idea of like one misalignment that, may be a thorn in people's sides.
Is this a popular topic in the formal verification community?
It's not. It's so great that this is being brought up. It's very recently, I think there's starting to be people in the AI alignment community have noticed like, oh wow, formal methods exist as a field, and there are things about it that they care about, right? For example, in formal methods, you have to have a precise definition of the property you want, and then you can assure that or not assure, right, that you have a system that meets that specification. So I think we are starting to see a bit of a marriage between the two. I think that it's so nascent that I think I won't even speak on it because I think people, I will, but take these things with a grain of salt because they're still developing. But I guess to answer Lisa's original question is like, would formal methods be the peak of that practice? I think there's a lot of utility. I think that formal methods is in fact captures too much precision for the alignment community. I think they want things to be more like what are just human. I think they acknowledge that human preferences aren't going to be this precise. Like very, informal methods. One thing that we love is that if preferences follow like an ordering, right? Some partial ordering or whatever, then
Connor's very familiar with ordering.
Yeah, on a lattice. yeah, absolutely. And then you can have then that's a specification essentially, right? Because there's formality to it. There are things that meet it and things that don't, and you can order it in a specific way. Alignment people generally are like, well, these things are softer than that. There's going to be conflicts, which is probably true, right? I think it's hard to turn human preferences and put it on the right axis such that it becomes like a strict ordering. And so I think there are definitely disagreements. I think that's one thing. And then I think that the things, by definition of them, these being two different things, like formal specifications and then objectives that the alignment community cares about, I think that influences the practices differently. AI alignment people will always be thinking about what is the most cutting edge piece of learning that we're using right now probably being LLMs and all the practice around that. Formal methods people care about things that they can actually use their methodologies on. So you see this a lot now more in control and robotics. Even there, not to a great scale, but I mean, this is where my research focuses on too, because these are actually things that my methodologies could be tractable on. And so there's not as much overlap either in terms of the kind of subject material that they care about. And so it becomes a bit of a vicious circle of like, okay, the things I like can do will influence what I do, and then things that I do will influence what I can do, right? So I think it's extremely underexplored relative to its promise. I think the intersection of these two areas, but it's not explored yet. And whatever Lisa and Connor feel about alignment, also, there's it can be an interesting space to foray into. So yeah, I if for the listeners, there's like an article I think called "The Reluctant Prophet of AI Safety," something along those lines. There's a profile, I believe, in the New Yorker of a pretty prominent figure in alignment. I think that does a good job providing sort of a balanced view of alignment and its critics, of which there are many supporters and many critics.
Yeah. I think in general, like it can be very hard to do academic research in fields that have a lot of visibility outside of academia that are especially like very kind of polarizing ones. Because I don't know, like the people will be upset no matter what you publish. Like, so someone is upset no matter what you publish when it's a very visible topic with people on like all ends of the spectrum for it. And
I'd love to ask you guys, actually. I feel so this is a conversation topic I think that I've also had recently about Berkeley. We talked about Berkeley, or now we're talking about popular topics in CS or in research. So I feel like it's good to I kind of want to bring them together. One topic that I've discussed and been hearing is that people, I think Berkeley and maybe some of its peers are very interested in the new thing and what is exciting. I think that professors and faculty here care quite a bit about doing the things that a lot of people care about in the moment. And so I think sometimes this can feel like Berkeley as a whole feels a bit like a prisoner of the moment. I think for me, I do interact with a lot of folks who work in more on the AI space. And so I think that's kind of influencing my bias quite a bit. But I'm curious to get y'all's thoughts on, do you feel that the environment can be or is properly academic to your liking? Is it not? Do you feel like sometimes you're being pushed further and harder towards what's exciting as opposed to maybe what you're interested in? Or is there alignment there? I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts and feelings on that.
Yeah, I definitely think like, in terms of being in the Bay Area, we get a lot of influence from Silicon Valley and a lot of influence from industry and like what's going on in startups and in big tech companies. And I think, Berkeley's a big place and there are professors who like kind of ignore that and others who pay a lot of attention to it. I definitely like in interacting with professors who pay more attention to it, experience like very different sorts of criticisms of my research. And sometimes I feel like it's too short horizon as a way to think about stuff. Like, oh, like this thing's really hot right now, you should be working on that thing for sure. Is I don't know, if everyone did that, then the next big thing wouldn't happen because no one is working on anything else. So yeah, I think it definitely plays a role. And I haven't done research at any other universities, but I get the impression that outside of the Bay Area, people have a pretty different experience, like what the research priorities are.
Yeah. I think, yeah, like Connor said, I think it's very, like, Berkeley's a big school, and I definitely know there are some professors who are not really at all associated with the hot new thing. Like, they kind of focus very purely on research. I do think that is not the majority of professors I interact with. I think in the AI lab in particular, I have definitely experienced frustration with I think that it is less academic than I would like less focused on pure research. And I think just actually outside of the Berkeley community, just like in general, when you go to conferences, I kind of wish people would scrutinize the research a bit more. Like, I think most of the feedback that I get is on usability, and not so much on like experimental setup or just these like more general, like, did you set up this experiment right? Are you actually proving what you think you're proving? Are you really discovering more about these models or the field, or are you just creating a product? That being said, like, I have had interactions with pretty much every professor where they all have, I feel like, at least one project that is like purely academic, and they really see it as like a long haul. But I think, at least for AI, Berkeley's had a lot of wins with like diffusion models recently. And I'm sure there are other ones that I'm definitely forgetting where they're really like, when you get a big win on something current, like, it is hard not to fall into like, oh, let's only focus on current things.
I think, yeah, you get a rush, I think, working on the thing that's really popular. Like, you get a lot more engagement than working on like something that isn't. But also, I don't know, I think you're subject to a lot of criticism that traditional academic work wouldn't be subject to. Like, how can I use this thing today in industry is really not generally what academic research is about. It's about solving problems that are further out a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. I think like with like this alignment stuff, for instance, like AI alignment, I feel like was not really a thing like five years ago. Honestly, even like 3 years ago, it's like questionable. And one thing that I really enjoy with working on things like LLMs or like these actual systems that have gotten good enough to where like, everyone in the world is using them, is it does bring new problems where you're like, I don't actually know if this is research. Like, a lot of AI alignment, AI safety problems are like, is this research? Is this policy? And somehow that makes me feel like I'm actually doing research. Of like, I actually don't fully know what is, if this is even correct. And like, it is building a new problem that I don't think would go away, but I would like it to be a bit more academic.
Yeah, I do like that. I think, deep learning, the fact that the advent of it came about because of a hardware thing, and not a software thing that we like understand so thoroughly. And then of course with LLMs, which are the nth power of that paradigm. I think I think that's a great point. You brought back scientific inquiry a little bit. Right, like in the natural sciences or in bio. I'm not a biologist, just disclaimer, so I don't know if this is exactly the case. This is my picture of it. You get to do things that you have no idea if they're going to work. Right. It's just like we've observed something, we actually hypothesize, right? The scientific process lives. Right. I think in CS, even in my experience, that oftentimes is not the case because you're in such a, we created computers, right? Right. We did not create living organisms. We created, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, we didn't create. I mean, we created computers. We like from start to finish, right? And so a lot of times you work on something knowing it's going to work, right? I'm going to exploit this property of I know there's a security risk with this specific hardware protocol, and I know how to exploit it, and I know this paper is going to work, and I'm going to write it because no one's ever done it before, and that counts as research in computer science.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to see now that there are questions that we legitimately, right? Like, what are the emergent behaviors of these huge systems? And no one knows, which is good. I think it's good that we have now a little bit of science to do, a little bit of unknown to explore. I think that's kind of nice.
Yeah. Playing around with models is one of my favorite things.
Yeah.
And it is kind of, I mean, I don't know about nice, but like the fact that most of these models are closed source, which you could argue is good or bad, but also that most of these models require an immense amount of compute to even run, has really forced a lot of academics to go in like inference only route.
Yeah.
You're dealing with models you don't know anything about, and you need to figure out what they are about on your end.
Yeah.
And I do kind of like that, like almost forced into trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah. It's like a human-made, like man-made natural landscapes, like pools and stuff like that. It's like this is, literally companies have just decided that they're going to close off, certain you're not going to be able to explore the weights and stuff like that of these models, and now it's become a field of it's become scientific inquiry now, kind of. Yeah, it is a little twisted, I guess.
Yeah,
it's like the fact that we want to do exploration to the unknown is because somebody decided it'd be an unknown.
Yeah,
feels a little strange.
My conspiracy, it's not a conspiracy. I'm sure it's true. Is like OpenAI, Anthropic, all these big companies that build these models. I'm sure they do a lot of testing, but I do think they fully know that like when they release a model, I feel like this is a big thing. Maybe not as much now. I think they do a lot more things in-house, but it used to be like with Clip or something, like a big model. They were like, oh, we released it, and like most of their paper was like, you figure out what's going on.
Crowdsource it.
Right, crowdsource model eval.
Yeah, because they know for Clip, right, they have API, right? Like the people who are going to use it right off the bat are not going to, no one in their right mind is going to go put it straight into a commercial facing application, right? People are going to do their due diligence, and that's exactly I think you're totally, I mean, yeah,
it's kind of free testing in a way.
Yeah,
it's also like I don't know. Generally, there's a problem with academic like systems research, at least for like if you don't have any users, you're kind of just speculating on how this thing's going to get used and like where the bottlenecks might be,
right?
And you, I don't know, a lot of academic work is very hungry for a workload, and like if you're releasing this thing and you're like you use it, then I'll see what the problems are and I can fix them. That's very valuable for research.
And you get people using it.
Yeah.
You get people used to the way that you are going to interface with them, allowing them to use it. You get to win on all fronts in most cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about you? Do you think Berkeley is academic enough for you, or academic enough in general?
I definitely feel that I think there's a latent pressure to be as far, keep up as far ahead as you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that getting the chance to work on a bit more first principles research is something I would like, and probably something I won't have as much of the chance to do in my PhD as I would like, which is fine, right? And I think I became more conscious of that as time went on, and I stuck with what I was doing, right? I didn't decide to, go back and do really fundamental theoretical research in formal methods or things like that. I do. It is interesting. You have other great programs all over the place that are a bit more, like Lisa mentioned, there are peer institutions that don't, I think, have that pressure as much. I don't go there, so I can't say for sure. But yeah, I'm curious to see kind of how this feedback loop changes now, given the space what QCS research has become, right? You have things like LLMs that got super hype. You have, learning based models that have become really popular and have captured kind of the public attention, and how that will affect schools or programs or research institutions that I think have prided themselves on being a little bit more siloed, whether they'll be able to keep that going. So it is hard to disentangle sometimes what is a product of the moment and what is Berkeley itself doing to push and pull those tides.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. I think seeing everybody in formal methods, especially to start to, their ears perk up now when they hear the kind of hot buzzwords, right? And so even people in a space which I consider to be very academic are now taking note of the hot new things.
Yeah.
And so
there's a lot of very like human pressures to work on that stuff.
Absolutely.
Like you get like attention from other humans who are interested in this thing, and you get in a lot of cases like funding and money and like the like opportunity to get a job in industry maybe, or like start a company or something. That
absolutely.
Like even the most like even people who absolutely love research, like I think experience the temptations.
You can't I mean we're in CS too, so I think we have a good, we start right off the bat a little less academically isolated, right? CS is there's so much interplay between industry and research in all fields of CS. So I think, like you're saying, I mean, this is only kind of, it's taking a problem not a problem, but it's taking a facet of CS and CS research that exists and really, really strengthening it. So it's anyone's guess where the things go from here.
Yeah.
In Berkeley and otherwise.
Yeah.
How did you end up in research yourself? I mean, the PhD is, I think, a pretty non-standard choice in CS in particular. Like, how did you get into research? What inspired you to spend many years thinking about computers?
Yeah, it's interesting to see how much of a random walk it is for everyone. I think it was especially in my case. I started in undergrad. My goal when I was a freshman, when I got to college, was to go into investment banking, be an investment banker.
See that.
Really? Oh, yeah. I usually people are usually bewildered when they hear it. That's strange.
Well, I mean, I feel like me saying I see it could be seen as an insult. It's not meant to be.
No.
Yeah. I mean, I think you would have hated it. I think you made the right choice.
Yeah, I definitely would have hated it. I took a CS class my first year, and I was not good at it. I had a really good mentor. She was a grad student who was co-teaching the intro class, and she, I would go to her office hours. She took me under her wing, and I think getting my first experience in mentorship in academia was really meaningful. And part of the reason why I wanted to start doing research was just like I liked that practice. And then I started doing research partway through undergrad on, very like theory of deep learning is like where we started doing things, and that was like the first kind of paper I ever worked on. And I think, I had good mentors all the way through. I think that really is what pushed my interests towards the space of ML and research. I like the paradigm of research a lot. I worked in industry a bit during undergrad for internships and stuff. And I never felt like I had the same sort of like heart squeeze moments as in research when like something worked, or where like the thing that we wanted to convince other people of did successfully convince right. Those are kind of the moments that I think I ended up chasing quite a bit. And so I think I came here because I had good mentors who kind of nudged me along. And so I think I like the fact that in academia you are not only like encouraged but incentivized to pass it forward. And so I think that all kind of made me want to come here and keep doing research, keep mentoring, keep being part of the process until I'm not anymore. So
that's nice.
Yeah. So
do you think you'll stay in academia?
Yeah, that's the question du jour as a fourth year. I probably won't. I do think it's been interesting. I think we started, with the podcast by shilling Berkeley. So now, maybe I'll go the opposite direction.
Yeah, let's go the other direction.
I do think that I've gotten a view of academia here at Berkeley that I did not get. I went to a fairly small Peckham Owls. I don't know what this is. I went to Rice in Houston, Texas. Right. My undergrad was pretty small, and it was a pretty academic space in general. I mean, at the time, the majority of our faculty, especially the ones who taught undergraduate classes, were all like systems people. And so, I didn't even talk to somebody who worked on ML until like I was later in my undergrad, in the second half of my undergrad. And so coming to Berkeley and seeing, you know, a lot of the greats about the program, that the students take so much ownership of, you know, the research agendas up until like the actual kind of organizing of research and events and things like that. I think you see that, which is great, but then you also see that, you know, people, the faculty at Berkeley and the academic environment is pulled in so many directions by so many external interests, whether it's folks in industry or funding or just the university's administration having things that they want their faculty to kind of be spending time on. And yeah, I think that it's certainly given me a more realistic picture of what academia is. And that you do have a little bit less kind of Puritan, like mentor-mentee freedom. Of course, that depends so much so on like where you end up being a student or a faculty member. But I do think that that's given me a good. It's made me want to explore what things are like in industry a bit, because of course, you know, there's a lot I like the principles of academia, but I do think that a lot of the research that gets done, you know, whether or not you're at Berkeley, whether that works on like the cutting edge or you're not, can feel a little bit detached, right? For example, like Lisa even mentioned, we in academia don't have access to these huge models. We don't have the resources simply to compute, and we're students, right? We're in academic groups. You know, even like the most flush with cash academic groups aren't just going to start spending tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to train a large language model, right? And so, you know, the ability to have somewhat more of a downstream look at things, impact on things, is appealing, especially to me, who I work on. A lot of my applications are on like autonomous vehicles or robots and things like that. But you know, most of my research is done in simulation, and so I think getting to see what things are like on the other side, I think, is meaningful. There's a lot that I'll miss about academia. I think that it's a hard decision to make. I think all PhD students probably, you know, depending on where you guys stand on this, kind of come to this decision no matter what. And I think there always will come a point where you feel a little unease.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I wouldn't say, you know, I don't think I'm 100% dead set or excited in any direction, but I don't intend to stay in academia immediately. So do a little bit more exploring before we start exploiting, I guess.
Yeah.
Put it another way. Where do y'all fall on this? I'm curious.
We both fall in the staying in academia space. Well, unless you've changed your.
Yeah, I guess I've only seen the like Bay Area professor experience of academia, which seems to be kind of doing a bit of a lot of different things. I think it's hard to do that outside of that setting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I like research a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I fall in the like, I really like research. I would love to stay in this community. I have recently been weighing the pros and cons of like the actual job of a professor is not just research.
Yes.
And it's a question of like, is this worth? Because there are many industry positions that are like quite focused on like just research.
Yeah.
You get paid a shit ton of money. Like you can still, because there's a lot of industry participation in academia, like you can still sort of be in these spheres in some way.
Absolutely.
So
yeah, it's fortunate that we're flexible.
Yeah.
More than ever, right? I mean, even on the systems side, you know, you have big groups in Amazon and Microsoft, for example, that work on eGraphs and CRDTs and things that people care about. And then, you know, needless to say, all the industry research. It's nice to have that flexibility. I think it's made my decision much easier because I do, you know, I don't want this to be my last, you know, time that I spend in academia as a PhD student. I would like to have some, whether it's an affiliation or, you know, whether I'm just like, I need to stick with this forever. And so I think it's much easier to decide to try something for a bit, especially that, you know, with the confidence that you can do industry research and then not have to be exiled from the community. Yeah. It helps. It matters a lot. I think that's part of the reason why I even came in the first place, is knowing that, you're not finished.
Yeah.
I think if you're in, again, I feel like I'm calling out bio people, but I love biology. But like if you're in biology and you want to go work in industry and there's not the thing that fits your kind of thesis topic or what you're working on, you might end up doing something totally different, right? I mean, whether, I see people who did their bioengineering PhDs, they work now in like pharma or like drug development on one hand, and then some people that just like they go into consulting and they just work in healthcare and things like that. I can imagine it's hard to not only pivot that hard, but to try and pivot back. And so it's nice. The fact that the lines are so blurred here is not a bad thing in that way, for at least in my opinion.
Yeah. So you're year 4. Are you graduating in May? You gonna take another year?
No, I'll take another year. Yeah. I think the standard. I'm not. I'm not. I don't. I spend a little bit too much time exploring. I think to speed run do the 4-year speed run. But I'll stick around for 5, depending on. I think at that point, either whether I'm ready to graduate or not. I think I'll evaluate and just say, will it be helpful for me to be here a little bit longer?
Yeah.
But
do you worry about? I think it is I might have mentioned this before, but like I think it's a somewhat common thing for people to if people often tell me like in their like 4th year or their 5th year, like, oh, I don't have enough to graduate, and I have a hard time believing them sometimes. Like, do you actually worry about like my advisor won't graduate me, or is it more just like I have personal goals that I want to hit?
I do think my advisor will graduate me if I like insist.
Yeah.
But I definitely understand this feeling of like I won't have enough. I don't have like for my own right. Like there's things that I want to do here.
Yeah.
And if I don't do them, I won't leave.
Sure.
Yeah. Unless I'm like 15. No, not 15. But like if I'm like long enough, unless I'm long enough in. But yeah, certainly. I mean, like I right now, even wrapping up the projects that I'm wrapping up, there's more I want to do.
Right.
Which is why I don't plan on graduating in May. Right. Is that there's like still more that I need to explore and try, more goals that I want to accomplish, experiences to get. And so, I think that's what I definitely resonate with. It's hard to feel ready to graduate.
Yeah.
I think that, again, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think that it is the case where you like do everything you set out to do and then like the sweat off your brow and march into the sunset is not as common. I think it's sort of like you did a lot. There's always going to be more stuff you want to do. You just reach a point, whether it's for personal, professional, or otherwise reasons, to go and just graduate, right? Whether it's like, oh, I can just keep doing it in academia, or I've been here enough, I'm going to go, or right. And then you just sort of, you tie up whatever loose ends you can tie up into a bow that becomes your thesis, and then you leave.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been sort of what I've observed from students. I think it's a good thing, right? The fact that you're a PhD student and that there's still more research you want to do, there's always more research you want to do. I think that's a good thing. I think that's maybe a good quality of Berkeley too, is that you're kind of still clamoring even as you leave. I think that's nice. I want to feel that way.
Yeah.
I don't want to be, if I have everything that I wanted to do wrapped up, I think that that's sort of a failure on me as a researcher.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have 4 years in, like, how has your experience differed year to year? Would you like rank your years or rate them?
Right. It's a huge, there's been such a variance. My first year, so I came in 2020. So I came in the class that started remotely or did their entire first year remotely. And it did feel a little bit, I don't want to say lost year, but it did feel like a lost year in a way, in that it was so hard to collaborate. Excuse me. And you just sort of, the collaborations, like I worked on a project with some senior students, it wasn't something that I was in the lead of whatsoever. And it was just hard to like go beyond that, right? Whatever your advisor set you up on. And so, in my second year, I think that's the year that I just started to explore more. So in my first year, I did a couple like small projects. There were no, like, it just felt like there were no stakes. Like it just felt like I was kind of like floating about. I was wrapping stuff up from my previous research. I was, just getting to know the group, and I was moving to Berkeley. It was COVID, and it was a personal transition for me, and so I just kind of did what was in front of me.
Mhm.
And then in my second year, I was in Berkeley properly, and then I finally got this chance to explore. So I started to explore a lot, and I tried a bunch of different projects with a bunch of different people. And I think I kind of like sampled and didn't really want to commit to a lot at the time, and so I think that was a very exploratory year, and which was nice in some ways, but I do feel at the end of it I was getting a little bit restless. And I think that was the year I felt the most kind of like floaty. And so in my third year, I think this is when I started to come back and to back down to earth, so to speak, and realize like, okay, there are things that I want to do, a million things. I think everybody kind of keeps some form of like you jot down your ideas or your goals and research project ideas you want to work on, but you never get all the way down to the bottom. So I was like, okay, what are the highest order bits? Things that I care about, things that I can do, and then things that like I can bring into reality. And that sort of started me on a more kind of focused path of like, okay, these are the projects that will comprise my thesis. How do I fix those things up? How do I get them to be like productive pieces of research? And then that folded into my fourth year, and I think now even more so for me. And I think that I see there's like this is like two spheres of PhD students. I think, like Lisa alluded to, there are people who like have their vision and their direction, and it doesn't waver much, and so then they cobble together the experiences to advance that. And then, for my experience, I was kind of on the other side, which is I didn't have that coming in right away, or at least I thought I had it, and then I realized I didn't want to work on what I was originally planning to. And then I cobbled together experiences, and then a bit later, even now, I'm focusing on like how do I focus and narrow that into something very concrete. So I mean, even more concrete than a thesis topic, which you can kind of you can tie together things as much as you need to, but like a vision of like what really do I want this research to contribute to? Who do I want to read these like papers and then use in their own work? How do I reach those audiences through my own research? And then leave that positive contribution. Those are the questions that now I think I'm really wanting to answer and starting to answer. So, like, for example, I have some project and some folks in formal methods, I really want to see it. How do I reach those people? Some folks in the learning side, I really want to see it. How do I, get those people together, show them the work, like make sure that it's something that they really care about, make sure it's sound and complete and effective.
Yeah.
And then let that then seed the next directions. Is sort of where I'm at now. But certainly, it's you start with an expectation, so your feet are on the ground, when you walk in, and then if you decide that that's what you want to do, that's great, and you just start running. If not, you gotta float a little bit and explore. That's what I did, and then you come back down to earth, and then start trying to be productive.
Yeah. I had like a switched fields a bit coming from industry into the PhD, and did not end up working on kind of what I maybe thought I would be working on. Yeah. Similar experience of floating a lot early on, and then having to kind of ground and pick a direction and commit to some subset of the possible things I could explore.
Absolutely.
I have a question for both of you. Do you feel like you picked the direction?
I have a plan for what my thesis will be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely have a direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think I almost feel like I let the direction pick me a bit more than I picked it.
So poetic.
I know. I'm a plus-one guy. It's why I'm writing. It's why I write for a living, technically, right? It's so I can work on poetry, academic poetry. I do think that I had things that I liked and was excited by, and then over time, I thought, I just spent time thinking about what about those things was interesting to me from an academic perspective, and how can that tie into something coherent. And that became my thesis topic. So now I have that stuff more or less settled, and so it's just a matter of getting those things done, which is hard. And then, of course, that pull of like, if there are things that I can like further do to make it relevant to like the modern day, what people care about in the exact moment, because things change so fast, then, I should apply it to LLMs or something that, people will want to use.
Do you feel like you have a plan?
I do, but I also have had this. I do, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if it is not correct. Or, like, if I, in 6 months, am like, this is not the plan. Like, I do think that the space that I am in now, like the general area, has been the area that I've been floating around since even before my PhD. So I think I will stay in, like, the general area, but I feel like every 6 months to a year, I'm like, oh, I got it. Like, this is so important. And each of those things, like, I still think are really important, but, like, I change my mind maybe more than I should. So, or maybe the right amount.
I think, I mean, that's I think that's the beauty of the PhD, right? Yeah. Is that you should, and you can, and you should.
Yeah, like, I think it's one thing I guess I do enjoy it, that, like, I at least know that I am able to change my mind on something, which I think some people are very bullish because they feel like they need to be super passionate about something.
Mm.
But at the same time, it's like, well, yeah, but you should have, like, a good pitch for what you're doing at all times, and, like, hopefully have a couple of works that show that. Yeah.
I think as long as there's a pitch, and then what you're saying, like, as long as there's something there, like if you have a pitch and then however much you need to support it, that's fine, right? Because then if it changes, it's fine, right? Like, the point is for it to change, I guess, right? Like, I think that's yeah.
But I will say I've had this interesting thing recently, like very recently. So I just finished a project, and, like, I feel like people's favorite thing, like, I really love this project. I feel like I talk about it all the time. I think it's really fun. Like, I love automated data science, which is what the project is based on. But then people often are like, oh, okay, so what's next? And you would think that I would have an answer, but I don't. And I feel like sometimes it's like, oh, I feel so passionate about this area and, like, this project, but, like, how do I not know what to do next? Or, like, have, like, multiple future directions? Like, I think partially is, like, I just need to write them all down and, like, rehearse them in my mind and probably out loud. But, I don't know.
Maybe you just solved it. Like, open and shut.
Yeah, actually, we did it.
Yeah.
Like, we're completely done all of data science.
It's all automated. Yeah. I think that's fine. I honestly, I actually really resonate with that.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of the works that I've done, or, like, of the works I've done, like, in many cases, it's been harder than I thought to, like, write the really, like, future works, like, section, which is like a paragraph in most papers anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm always like, man, I've just been so invested in, like, the thing in front of me that I haven't really thought about.
Right.
Even though there are, like you're saying, like, there's a million questions that you come up in your mind as you work on these things, and it's just sometimes a matter of recording them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think there's kind of a beauty in that almost.
Yeah.
So you do a project, and then you get to take a little bit of time to, like take stock, right? Like, if the thing was so obvious right in front of you, I feel like that almost takes away from the kind of joy of research, which is to do a little discovery, right? To explore a little bit. So you get the chance, right? And that's, I think that'll probably make your research for the better, ultimately, right? Is that you're not just, like, head is totally burrowed down and you have, like, your next 8 goalposts set up already.
Yeah.
I think also it feels a little bit bad to have a research question and go work on it and then come out of it with 10 more questions, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm kind of making backwards progress. I answered my list of questions.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You should definitely be satisfied with your research. I think that's, like, such a good, like, you should be happy with, or, I don't know if happy is the right word. You should definitely have some level of satisfaction. Yeah. If you, like Connor said, if you don't ever feel that way, then like, how could you possibly work in a field where you're constantly like, man, should have done more, should have done something else,
Oh, well,
I mean, you definitely will want to do more.
Well, so, question, when you guys finish a research paper, are you in the camp of like, cool, let me not look or think about this for like a good week or, longer. Like, I can't look at this paper. I see everything that it could have been or whatever. Or are you in the camp of like, hell yeah, I'm proud. I'm like happy relatively with what I've done. I feel satisfied. I'm not scared if somehow the overleaf pops up on my computer, sort of thing.
For me, I feel like I'm usually, by the time I submit a paper, I am a bit tired of it and like I have other things I want to be working on.
Yeah.
And so like, yeah, maybe I take a break or like jump into my other projects the next week. I was actually like shocked the first time I worked on a project where someone like the day after submitting was like, okay, here's like what we want to do next. Like, I want to like keep going with this. Cause yeah, for me, like, especially like as you come up on the deadline, like you're really like, you're like executing on stuff that like
for sure
is kind of old news a lot of times at that point. Like you're
yeah. You don't get to do, you're not reading papers and getting inspiration. You're just for sure. Yeah, I feel like the answer is kind of, I don't know if both of them. I definitely take a week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and honestly, like, I think part of that is also just because taking a week away from, especially, if you're doing something that's a little bit more algorithmic in spirit and stuff like that, is good. Like, for example, we wanted to submit something to iClear, which is in September, which didn't make the deadline. But I still took a week because we were pushed for it, and I was like, all right, I'm going to do something else for a week. We come back to it, and now we're like, oh my God, there are like legitimate flaws with what we wanted to do.
Yeah.
And now we have the chance, and now we're going to address
Thank God
them.
we didn't submit.
Exactly, right? Like, and honestly, if I had just like part of me at the, we didn't make the deadline, and part of me wanted to be like, all right, let me just finish up the things, get to like a minimum kind of trashy thing, and then just like whatever, either throw it on archive or ignore it until 2 days before the next deadline.
Yeah.
I'm glad I didn't, because I think then, right, you would have missed stuff, but it just gave me the chance to sit and marinate with the material even more. And it sort of was like an in-between of like, well, we haven't finished exactly what we wanted to yet, but I still get to think about the next steps and still get to think about, and I have a lot more inspiration of how this work can be used in the future than I did before that. And I think that I would have had I, just like made it to some minimum and kind of kept my focus narrowed. So yeah, I think there's a lot of beauty in taking different like bird's eye level views of a project.
Yeah. All right. Seems like what should be some concluding question? Do you have any advice to give anyone? Me, Connor,
not y'all.
Undergrads interested in grad school.
Let me think. I will say, I have some undergrads that I like have mentoring, and so I guess this is advice I've given. They're applying to grad schools and stuff like that. So this is questions that I've gotten. I'll say the first thing is, don't underestimate just how powerful your community can be. Even just friendships and stuff that you make, you'll have, these things matter a lot, especially in grad school, which is very flexible, in research too, which is very flexible, but also very open and can be very isolating. Having people just in general that you can even just shoot the shit with, I think matters a lot. I think that this is, research is such a community driven effort, and, your community, you don't have to make friends or make relationships just because they like are people you work with or in your lab or like that will help you advance your research agenda. You can just, have community, and that community will be helpful in ways that you don't expect. And so I would definitely say prioritize that. I would say the other thing is like, there are sometimes, and I felt this way as an undergrad, and some undergrads, I think I was talking to some folks who feel similar, which is like, they have something they want to work on in grad school, but they're like, this isn't my life's dying passion.
Mm-hmm.
So should I really be doing this? I think like, you don't have to be obsessed with something and have it be everything that like matters to you in your life to want to work on something. And that thing, like, then it can change, right? Of course, these things, right? In a way, it's a good thing, because if you are like all focused on one thing and it turns out to not be what you expect it to be, you're going to have disillusionment. And so I would say, don't worry too much if you're not living and dying for the thing you're interested in. Being interested is, in my opinion, more than enough. Go for it, right? And then if it doesn't end up being interesting anymore, you can cross that bridge when you get there. Yeah. To the undergrads who may listen to this, that's yeah.
Give it a shot. You can always drop out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, honestly, somebody told me that. Yeah, like one of the very first people I talked to, I was asking somebody for advice on grad school who did a PhD, and he was like, "Dude, if you don't like it, just leave." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess."
Oh, right.
Yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah.
So, wow, this is such a great time.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Of course, thank you so much.
Where can people find you if they want to?
I am at Ameesh SH on Twitter/X now. I don't tweet about anything besides research projects that my collaborators, or my friends do. But I think it's great work, so you'll get some fun papers, some fun formal methods tinged papers. So come send a message, give me a follow. We can chat about it if you're interested.
All right.
Awesome.
Wow. Amazing.
Thank you for having me.
And with a nice clap. Okay.